First of all, Karen, thanks for joining us today as our keynote speaker. We are very pleased to have you here. Karen is the president of Bank of New York Mellon, overseeing the company's global client management, regional management, human resources functions, and its treasury services business. She also leads the company's strategic growth and global innovation efforts. She is also a member of the Financial Services Roundtable and is on the board of the directors of the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, the Private Expert Funding Corporation, shortcut PEFCO, and SunCoke Energy. She has consistently appeared in and indeed topped American Bankers' list of the 25 most powerful women in banking. Karen, we are all excited to listen to your speech and would be delighted if you allow for a few minutes of discussion after your speech. And with this, I would like to hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with you. It's humbling, actually, to be following in a long line of distinguished speakers and an honor to be the first non-German female in this role. I thought it might be helpful to start by telling you a bit about BNY Mellon, the company that I'm pleased to help lead. Our business model is very different from a traditional retail or commercial or investment bank. We do not focus on the broad retail market or products such as mortgages, credit cards, or auto loans. We're an investments company. We are completely focused on the investment process, managing and servicing global financial assets. We have two principal businesses, investment management and investment services. In investment management, we are one of the world's 10 largest investment managers, with $1.4 trillion in assets under management. We like to say that we are the biggest investment management company that people don't know about because we operate 16 boutiques with names such as Newton, Standish, Insight, and the Boston Company. On the investment services side, we service more of the world's financial assets than any other company in the world, including more than 26 trillion in assets under custody and administration. Huge numbers. In fact, it's estimated that we manage or touch in some form, almost 25% of the world's financial assets on any given day. Europe is a primary engine of growth for BNY Mellon. That's demonstrated most visibly by the expansion we've seen in our workforce here over the past decade, where 10 years ago we had around 1,000 staff members in the region. We now have close to 10,000 employees based in 29 locations across 16 countries. Today, our revenue across the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region exceeds $3.5 billion. We've also gone all in Germany. We've been serving clients in Germany for over 80 years and have been on the ground here for 40. Over just the last few years, we've grown our presence substantially. We've invested in building our asset servicing business, where we've gone from the 14th largest provider just a few years ago to one of the largest service providers in the country. We also purchased the remaining 50% of our West LB investment management joint venture, which we've renamed Meriton. Meriton has more than 25 billion euros in assets under management. We're now one of the largest U.S. financial services providers in the German market, operating out of Frankfurt and Dusseldorf. We have more than 200 institutional relationships here, including more than 20 DAX-listed companies and 600 employees in the country. Germany is among the top markets we've defined for future growth, so it's safe to say that we're big believers in this country, and we're invested in its success. In the weeks leading up to this conference, I gave a great deal of thought to how my remarks could contribute in a meaningful way to the conference. Where to invest, where to get funding, the pivotal role of investor relations. I thought about your themes, I decided that many of you have done plenty of your own research on where to invest and where to get funding. And there's a roster of incredibly smart people on the agenda who will offer substantial food for thought in those areas. So I took a step back and thought more broadly about the challenges facing the investor relations function, especially today. The biggest challenge every investor relations professional faces today is maintaining trust. Well, sure, you're thinking, since when has trust not been important? But stay with me here. Things have changed. Economic events have transpired over a number of years that have made investors far less credulous, and relationships between companies and their investors have become far more tenuous. Certainly you know that. We had the decisive event in 2008 when it became clear that Lehman Brothers had taken too much risk, and the subsequent discovery that major financial institutions across the globe, including across much of continental Europe, were themselves too highly leveraged. With that came the bailouts and substantial public outrage, and the questions of, do we really know what's on the books of these institutions? Can we trust that they're taking the steps necessary to rid themselves of toxic assets and more effectively and realistically risk manage for all conceivable scenarios? Can we trust them, period? It wasn't just the general public that was expressing that. It wasn't just the politicians and regulators. It was also the rating agencies and the most sophisticated investors asking those questions, especially as their stakeholders began demanding that they be held accountable. Investor lawsuits followed. And just as the tempest over the banks began to recede, came news of the trading losses of the infamous London whale, with the word billions in the headline across the globe. And yes, much of the focus has centered on the big banks, rightfully so, given their systemic significance to the global financial marketplace. However, these events have been a wake-up call to investors across industries. Their expectations in the companies in which they invest, their expectations of what investor relations professionals should provide have changed. The dynamic has changed. Most of you here today represent enterprises that did not contribute in any financial way to the crisis. Most of your companies have been untouched by the scandal, have given investors no reason to doubt or mistrust you. All the same, all of you have been affected by these events. Investors simply do not have the mindset that they had before September 2008. At the very least, they come to the table with healthier skepticism. The relationships are more tenuous than they were, and it's our shared challenge to restore that trust. Before delving into those specific challenges, I want to expand on the concept of trust through the prism of the twin crises I've been navigating. A tragic situation at a university on which I sit on the board, and the 2008 financial collapse. I'll share with you some of the issues that we've been wrestling with, both at Penn State University and in the financial services industry, to restore the trust that is so fundamental to both. These crises were not anything I was prepared for. Never could I have imagined that the crossroads at which my chosen industry, financial services, and my alma mater, Penn State, would find themselves. Never could I have imagined the soul-searching that my colleagues and I have been engaged in as we wage an uphill battle to restore trust. Trust in Penn State, trust in Wall Street, trust in our generation as leaders. Learned, and am still learning, as we move forward with addressing these crises, and I'd like to share them. Then I'll welcome your comments or questions, and hopefully we can have a lively discussion. But first, I thought it would be useful to look at what's at stake. I'm going to run through a quick laundry list that encapsulates the havoc that a crisis can cause to an institution or business. A crisis can do the following. It can severely damage a brand. It can jeopardize the brand's appeal to employees, making it more difficult to attract and retain the best employees. It can affect sales and drive away customers. It can dramatically affect financial condition, whether by negatively impacting share price and earnings, or in the instance of a nonprofit, stifling donations. It can absorb, inordinately, management's time and focus. Not a happy list. And unfortunately, many of those either happened at Penn State and to the financial services industry, or certainly had the grave potential to do so. It can be a simple act, yet cause catastrophic damage. It was William Shakespeare who famously wrote, quote, "Don't trust the person who has broken faith once." Words to live by, and yet a terrifying and daunting concept for any leader confronted with the unthinkable. How do you undo the damage? How do you begin to repair the broken faith? Or can you? It's helpful to ponder those questions because while I hope none of you have to deal with an all-consuming crisis, you will face situations where you have no easy options, no quick fixes. To a certain extent, only luck can completely save you from these situations. If you're a leader during those times, it's likely no one will remember all the great things that you've done, the people you've helped, the numbers you've put on the board. You will be defined by your actions in that big moment, a moment you simply cannot fully prepare for. So let's get to the heart of my big moment with Penn State, which takes a bit of doing. What Penn State has been going through is instructive for anyone in the business world, but especially for those in your critical functions. It holds lessons for all of us. As background, Penn State is not only one of the largest universities in the US, it is one of the top 1% of universities worldwide. It's recognized in countless areas, particularly for its research. It has also quite a reputation for its athletic programs. In fact, I'm proud to have participated in them as a student athlete. One sport where Penn State has a huge reputation is for American football. An incident involving that football program created a serious crisis for the school, a crisis of trust. It all happened in just the span of a few days. Jerry Sandusky, a former Penn State assistant football coach, was arrested on charges of sexually assaulting 8 boys over a multi-year period. It was a top news story for weeks on end, one that became more ugly and more salacious with each new allegation. The school's CFO and athletic director were charged with failing to report allegations of abuse from nearly a decade earlier. They stepped down from their jobs. The school came under investigation for its handling of crime reporting. The university's president was released from his duties, and then there was the issue of the coach, Joe Paterno, a legend and a beloved father figure. Facts surfaced that showed that Paterno had failed to follow up on an earlier report that Sandusky was seen abusing a child in a university facility. After 60 years of coaching the team, Paterno was fired. That all transpired in just 1 month, November 2011. Meanwhile, a bonfire swirled. Disclosures, damnations, and a media circus accompanied these events and continued unabated. The students were confused. They were angry at the administration for not talking. They were angry with the board for not directing the administration. They channeled their fury to the media and social outlets. The faculty was in near rebellion. Our staff, some 38,000, was understandably concerned. What was going to happen? Most upset of all was arguably our biggest constituency, and a critical one, our alumni, 570,000 of them. I cannot emphasize enough the breadth and depth of their anger, some of which still persist to this day. How could such things have happened to their beloved university? How could we, as an administration and board, not have seen it and even prevented it? We might dispute these questions, but they were heartfelt and painful. Then the following January, the presiding chairman of the board decided not to run for election. Penn State, the administration, and the board were in crisis. It was against this backdrop that I moved into the role of chairman of the Board of Trustees that month. We faced an uphill climb. The general public's trust in Penn State had been shattered. As a member of that board, I felt a sense of personal responsibility, even if I had joined the board well after the events in question. Besides, I loved Penn State. I believed in Penn State. That great institution contributed greatly to the person I am today. But the situation also presented opportunities. It's during a crisis that organizations develop a greater willingness to challenge tradition, to slay sacred cows. Recognizing that the status quo is what allowed the situation to happen can make the prospect of change much more attractive. Leaders have to seize on those moments. And in this instance, I did. I moved immediately to reorganize how the board operates. Now more than ever, we needed to focus on critical issues. So we created new committees focused on outreach, audit, risk, legal, and compliance, and especially important to the institution, governance and long-range planning. We included on those committees for the first time representation from faculty, alumni, and the student body. And we operated them in a business-like manner with clear objectives and strategic plans. It's been a long road, but we are making significant progress. We're refocusing our philosophy of how we act as a board, administration, and university, entering a new era of better, more representative, and transparent governance. We are accepting the consequences of failures and fixing wrongs. We're trying to put the scandal behind us, if that's even possible. Let's shift gears and talk about the financial crisis. My involvement in the financial crisis has reinforced how challenging the task of restoring trust can be. BNY Mellon was impacted much differently than many financial institutions. As I said earlier, we're not a traditional bank, but rather an investments company. Given our specialized focus, we did not contribute to the crisis of 2008. We entered the crisis as a profitable, well-capitalized institution, and we remain so today. In fact, we worked with the US government to help avoid the crisis. The reason I pointed that out is that, to many, is a distinction without a difference, a fact which has been phenomenally frustrating to BNY Mellon. We were not involved with underwriting subprime loans or structuring the complex investments that fueled the crisis. There was no Sandusky in our mix. And yet, as with so many other financial institutions represented here today, we were tarred with the same brush. We're a bank, a financial services company. Our CEO was part of the group appearing before Congress to accept a public scolding for TARP. We've had protesters march on our buildings, place our logos on their signs, and hand out leaflets about how we're corrupting the world. Crisis inspires an emotional response. We quickly learned that fighting fires with facts was like attempting to douse an inferno with a tea kettle. Our energy has been better spent being part of the solution and making certain we're applying the lessons of the economic crisis. We're focused on setting standards for our industry in reforming critical elements of the capital markets infrastructure. All too frequently, the tendency in responding to crisis is to isolate specific root causes and fix them without examining the thought processes and leadership styles that contributed to the mess in the first place. Because if they don't change, won't new issues just take root and cause similar or worse problems. The financial crisis, like the Penn State crisis, shone a bright light on the need for organizations to find ways to challenge thinking, to encourage productive discussion and dissent. But it's a wake-up call to all organizations. For starters, the composition of leadership teams has to change. For years, people like me have been advocating for greater diversity and inclusion. More diverse teams have proven more adept at innovating, driving sales, and improving shareholder performance. I think we undersold a critical argument that ensuring that teams have people who think differently and challenge convention and policies is critical to identifying contrary facts. They help save us from ourselves. Another issue is that those people you bring to the table because they offer a different perspective, well, they quickly assimilate, and that value is gone. We have these conversations around the executive table at BNY Mellon, how to find the optimal balance. I'm not sure we've found any easy answers, but we continue to rethink the definition of good teamwork. If we're all harmonious and aligned in our thinking, what are we missing? What is the price we will pay, and how long will we be paying it? Because what both these crises have reinforced is the stubborn nature of reputational hits to great, once mighty brands. These episodes will continue to cast a shadow for years to come. To me, this is an area in which investor relations officers can provide critical leadership. I imagine many of you already frequently find yourselves in the position of being that person who has to challenge the thinking of your leadership. Part of the reason you've enjoyed success as investor relations professionals is that you're skilled at providing the healthy dissent, at injecting the voice of cynicism or reason at critical junctures. You're, in effect, the chief dissent officers. And yes, at times, you can frustrate those of us running the business. Everyone else around us is telling us how great our ideas are, and you're picking at them, finding flaws. It seems as if you're just pessimists. In actuality, you and your teams are just adept at examining our plans and progress and great ideas through the prism of how will shareholders view this? Will this be seen as credible, actionable, and a good strategic use of resources? When you tell us our ideas fail to pass all those tests, it may not be what we want to hear, but we need to hear it. It helps us reshape those ideas, recalibrate our thinking, make changes to avoid potential pitfalls. This is truly an opportunity for you. Executive teams tend to be keenly aware that this is an era in which relationships with investors are particularly fragile. They're more inclined to seek your counsel, more inclined to take heed when you express caution. This is your moment. Your voices of healthy dissent are needed now more than ever. That dissent can prevent the lapses of judgments and ethics that have sowed the seeds of suspicion among investors. You can also be a force for helping drive your organizations to not only welcome differing viewpoints, but to value them. Most corporate cultures are not there today, and it is to their peril, to the peril of all of us, actually, because every time there's another headline, another scandal, investors generally get more jumpy. They trust everyone less. I worry that the short-term thinking that has become so prevalent in our world is another serious threat to investor trust. We're judged on last quarter's performance, last week's game. I wonder whether our quick trigger mindset is conducive to maintaining strong cultures, building lasting relationships, and making decisions that are in the long-term good. I know the answer. It's not. And yet I have to continually challenge myself as a leader in that same vein. The pressure to drive strong, near-term performance can often be at odds with doing what's best for shareholder value 5 years down the road. It seems to me we need to be more courageous. In order to do that and not be perceived as capricious, we need to better educate our investors about our business models. At BNY Mellon, since the financial crisis, we've focused on providing increased disclosure, and we know we're not alone. Last year, BNY Mellon Depository Receipts conducted a study of global trends in investor relations. It was our 8th such study and included input from more than 800 respondents from 59 countries. Many of you participated, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time to fill out the survey. It is all of your contributions which make the survey the unique global IR trend analysis which it is today. One finding showed that effective disclosure continues to be seen as the dominant investor relations goal. On the buy side, investors are asking corporates for more information, most notably cash flow projections. Corporates reported that inquiries into their debt profiles have increased, a possible indication of the growing complexity of leverage. It can seem onerous to gather all that additional data, keep it current, and proactively share it across the investor base, but there's a benefit. It's helping investors become much more educated about our business models. Business leaders have long questioned whether that would be such a good thing. After all, the more you open yourselves up to scrutiny, the more questions you'll encourage, the more positions you'll have to defend. And that's certainly one outcome. The burden on investor relations departments are only going to continue to grow. But the flip side is that as investors become more educated, they come to really understand the nuances of your business model. They start asking more of the right questions. As they become more sophisticated, they are better able to discern why variance exists, which is helping manage their expectations appropriately. We're also having a higher level discourse, and they feel more comfortable that they have a good grasp on our performance and our plans, which entails management spending much more time than ever with investors. Our investor relations team remains the front line of contact, but our executive leadership team is engaging directly on a variety of matters. At a basic level, they want to know that there is an effective and executable operating plan in place, targeting achievable short and long-term goals. The more concrete, the more granular the disclosure, the more frequent the updates on the progress, the greater their faith. Investors also want to hear directly from us on issues such as leadership direction, balance sheet management, deployment of capital, the level of capital repatriated to investors, governance, and compensation. We're using those opportunities to educate them on the risks inherent in our model. They're adverse to headline risk, so the better they understand the conceivable risks facing the companies in which they're invested, operational, reputational, compliance, litigation, liquidity, market risks, the more comfortable they are. And when they're having to dig for that information, they tend to be a lot less trusting than when the company is offering it up proactively. So it's a real change in mindset for many companies. We've also been increasing the access to our executive management team beyond the CEO and CFO. And I know that's a trend that we're seeing in the marketplace. Again, it can be onerous at times, but I see it as a positive development. If you have talented leaders with solid plans, that exposure should be a positive. I know you're likely thinking of the practical implications. When most of the communication is happening through the IR team and the CEO and CFO in very controlled settings, such as investors' presentations and earnings calls, it's much easier to ensure a consistent message. That challenge came through in our study also, where the need to coordinate messaging was among the top goals of IR officers for 2013. It's going to take time and focus. Are we hearing a theme coming through loud and clear? Yes, companies are going to have to carefully examine where they are allocating sufficient resources to making you and your colleagues successful. The bottom line is that we're at an inflection point for investors. While they're less trusting generally, they need to invest somewhere, so they're looking, yes, for the industries and business models they believe in. But beyond that, they're consciously or unconsciously performing a character assessment. And the way each of us engage, the frequency with which we do that, the level of energy we put behind achieving transparency are sending them signals. Reputational hits can be crippling, and the damage sustained. The way in which our organizations navigate this period will have a lasting impact on our ability to attract and retain investors and maintain strong relationships. Let's use this time to not only weather this challenging period, but to see how we can use it to get better. A crisis is an opportunity to learn. Let's learn from the mistakes that other companies have made. Let Penn State be your cautionary tale, a storied institution, an adored leader, both beyond reproach, and then, the next day, reputations in tatters. Let Penn State also be your inspiration. None of us can guarantee there won't be issues on our watch with reputational impact, hopefully nowhere near the magnitude of what Wall Street or Penn State have been dealing with. Yet in 18 months, Penn State has begun to show signs that it will once again be defined by its high academic standards rather than its darkest chapter. It will be a long road, but it can be done. It will take leaders who accept, who believe, who know that they have the power and the great responsibility to make the sometimes unpopular decisions necessary to make a positive difference in our world. It will take professionals who have the courage to challenge thinking that is taking us in the wrong direction, to be catalysts for productive discussion and dissent. If the time comes, I do hope that each of us will embrace our responsibility to prevent the unthinkable from happening on our watch. Thank you. Now I think we're going to take some questions.
Thank you
Yes.
very, very much
Yes.
for your insight and the transatlantic approach on some of the key issues that we're talking about
Yes.
here. And thank you for bringing some time for some questions. And I'll open up for all the questions that you might have now for Karen here. So shoot along. Yeah, Stefan.
I'm the icebreaker, so
Thank you for that, Stefan.
just a very quick one, and I guess also in our daily work would be interesting to hear what really changed with you and your interaction with your IR department before, in the middle, and
Yes.
after the crisis.
Yes.
Can you show something on?
Yes,
on that?
absolutely. So I'm happy to say that before the crisis, we had begun to try to educate our investors about our business model, because we're a little bit different. Because we are an investments company, we're a little different than many of our peers, even those that we're directly compared to. So we were doing kind of information sessions for many of our investors, trying to get that word across. I would say that we got much more active in giving a forward look. Before 2008, we were kind of dead set against giving any kind of forward-looking statements. We increased those significantly. And the level of detail that we now reveal in our financials and that we talk about much more readily is significant. Now, some of it, of course, came through stress testing, which happened to all of the U.S. banks, and I know you've had a fair amount of stress testing in Europe as well. So that also, from the outside, created a new level of transparency that, as a G-SIFI, a globally significant financial institution, we also have to comply with. So some of it was outside and some of it was inside, but the mindset definitely changed.
Any more questions? I know there are questions. Maybe I'll start with one before we get some others. Your company is very well known in Germany and to a lot of corporates here for the depository receipts program.
Yeah.
Is that still an issue? Is that growing? Is that changing in
Yes.
these days?
Yes. So depository receipts, as many of you know, is a terrific vehicle for cross-border investing and for accessing investors in other countries. Started as American depository receipts to access American investors and now has gone much more broadly globally. Yes, it is still a very popular vehicle. It is most popular, and actually Europe is the largest market for depository receipts. So you have many more mature programs. Most of the largest companies in the region do either have or have thought about a depository receipt program. The growth, though, comes from emerging markets. And so the recent past has been a little tough because emerging markets growth has slowed down significantly. But it's a product and a service that we believe is here to stay, and a very important market for us here. And one thing I would say is Katharina Haldenthaler, who's here, who on our team, who is responsible for both depository receipts and global collateral services, is here and will be here for the next couple of days to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There is another question.
Thank you. Wolfram Schmidt from the Talanx Insurance Group in Hanover. Karen, if I may, I'm somewhat excited that I'm meeting a Penn State alumni today because I'm also one.
Is that right?
Yeah. I had the fun to study there one semester in an exchange program of my alma mater, which is Cologne.
That's great.
I confirm it's a great institution. I was not in the football team.
Nor was I.
But without kidding, my question to you, Karen, is you said that your institution is different to the others. True.
Yes.
But nevertheless, you are central in the banking industry. You're central in Wall Street. You see most of the cash flow. You see a lot of the asset clearing every day around the globe. Can you give us a hint? Can you give us your insight? Where are we in terms of the recovery from the last crisis? Where are we in the cycle?
Yep.
Back to normal,
Yes.
if this will ever come?
Yeah, I mean, we're actually pretty encouraged, at least about specific economies around the world, that we actually have come through the worst. I would say that the U.S. is probably in the best condition in terms of the banks being better capitalized now with all of the insistence and TARP money and having paid it back, and the focus from the regulatory community. We feel that the U.S. is poised for, of course, we've had about 2% growth rate. 2013 we think could be slightly better, and then by 2014 that things would be much better. Of course, Germany is a star in Europe. We're worried about the peripheral countries, as I'm sure all of you are. So we think Europe is going to be a mixed bag. And we think, however, that you're kind of to the trough, if you will, of a saucer recovery, not a V or a U. We think you'll go kind of this way. And that certainly 13 will be better than the past couple years, and then 14 better than that. Concerned about Latin America, Brazil particularly. I was just there a couple of months ago, and every business person there seems to be quite concerned about their government and whether they're, just pulling too many levers to be effective. So, of course, Brazil is such an important part of Latin America. And then Asia, we don't count China out. We think that they'll have a decent growth rate. India less so. So, generally speaking, we think 13 is going to be better, and then 14 and beyond will be a lot better, probably with recession returning after a new president in the U.S. For the United States. So, and probably not a lot of movement on, health care and all the things that many of us would like, entitlements and all that kind of thing that we'd like to really grapple with. Probably not a lot of will, as you can probably tell. So. Any other questions?
Any more questions? Yeah. In the back there.
Hi, Karen. This is Kieran here.
Yes.
Who does the Investor Relations Department report? Is it CEO or CFO? Second question, are you personally involved in investor relations targeting and talking to investors?
Yes.
And third, with Asia becoming powerful, is the investor relations just based in New York, or you have in London or in Asia, Singapore? How does the whole investor relations strategy work?
Okay, great. Thank you for all those questions. So the investor relations group in our company reports to the CFO. All of the people in the executive committee, so we have a 14-member executive committee, of which I'm part, we all participate both in our quarterly earnings call. So it's led off by our CEO and our CFO, and then all questions that come in from the analysts, we all participate depending on what the question is. And we also do often large investor days where, you know, the whole team, if you will, you know, gets showcased and discussed. We do centralize in New York. We do not have an active activity, if you will, in London or in Asia, but our management team travels there often, but it's with the investor relations group from New York. And we actually have some in Pittsburgh as well, for that matter, because of the Mellon legacy of Pittsburgh. So, and, you know, what we've tried to do more and more over time is to have both large investors who often come in and just want to meet with us in our offices, as well as the analysts, get more and more comfortable with the people in our company and the leadership of the company, because we feel that that's a key strength.
I just trying to find out, does it make sense for you to go to London and Asia, or you think it doesn't make sense, just go do it investor relations out of New York?
Yeah,
with your company size you have, the bank you have.
Yes, well, because we think it does make sense, because we're a global company. We have about almost 40% of the revenue for the company is outside of the U.S., and so we think it's important for lots of different constituents to show our senior faces, wave the flag, and many of us do extensive traveling where you're not only, you know, of course, now we visit a lot of regulators as well, so all of our constituents, key clients, investors, regulators, it's all important to have face time. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as I understood you correctly, you said that the composition of leadership teams have to change in order to become more resilient to crisis. Can you give us an idea where we are in this process?
Yeah, it's not so good. And I just saw that that's quite a dialogue that's happening with Angela. And so, of course, you know, if you really look at it in the context of diversity, which is really what I'm aiming at, it's not surprising that those economies that do the best job using their full talents of their population will probably do better. This is a thing I think in some ways to fear possibly most about China, because I think post-Mao they actually believed that they were equal, and they are, if you work or go to China, it's pretty obvious that women are doing just about the same as men are in their organizations. So I mean, it's an economic imperative that you have to use the talent of your population to the maximum ability. I thought it was very interesting in the U.S. election that President Obama won through the minority differences that are happening in the U.S., that really the white vote, if you will, was not enough to offset the minority vote, which is who is going to be working for you, right? That's who's in the population. So we see it as a huge imperative. It is a very, very hard, men, women, people of color, multicultural. It is a really hard nut to crack, though, because there are built-in difficulties with lack of role models, with lack of networks, with prejudice about themselves. I mean, there's just a ton of roadblocks to get it, even if you want to, which I think most companies do, want to have more diversity. There are a lot of roads to travel. So I think it's really poor, but it's something we all have to do, or we're just not going to be as competitive as we could be. And if other parts of the world figure it out before we do, they're going to have an advantage.
But if I am trying to link two of the keywords you mentioned, diversity and regulation, what's your point of view on, is regulation maybe a way to create more diversity? That's a discussion we're having here in Germany, get more quota and all that. And
yes.
You mentioned already, it's not only male, female, it's, you know, elderly people, younger
yes.
people, migrants, non-migrants. What role has the regulator to play in that?
Yeah,
if we are too slow in adopting what is kind
yes.
of obvious.
Yeah, I'm a big anti-quota person. I know that's what you're all debating here in Germany. Because I think it minimizes the accomplishments of those people who do, you know, deserve to be in a position that they deserve to be in. It kind of makes everybody think, gee, they're only there because of. I do think that many countries who have made quotas, certainly notably in Scandinavia, have made quotas happen, have actually changed the composition. So it's almost like, you're not sure what will actually move the needle. But I'm just personally, and our company is anti-quota.
Okay, we do have the odd minute. If there's one more question. There's one there.
I'm hopefully not closing the eyes again, but coming back to our motto of this conference, one very easy question, or easy question but difficult to answer. Do we see a liquidity bubble or not?
Our economist does not see a liquidity bubble because
But what's your view?
Yeah, well, I listen to our economist because I'm not an economist. But, I think that there's the potential because, certainly in the U.S., things are heating up again. Housing is doing better. People's wealth, again, at least at the top percent, is higher than it's ever been. Some consumer goods are getting more expensive with, potential for inflation. But, again, our economist very much sees that it's different by country and that it probably won't, the regulators are so aggressive now in managing the kind of components that it probably will not cause significant issues. And certainly the Fed is incredibly aggressive at pulling the throttles when needed.
What role is the euro, the fact that Europe tries to have a common currency and has still different fiscal policies, what role is that playing in the development of Europe, or the role that Europe is playing in the world in the future?
Yeah, it's been a scary time, guys. I know you know that. Maybe less sitting in Germany than in our case, and I'm sure many of your countries do business, across the Eurozone. From Greece, and now Spain and Italy. It's an area to really be concerned about. And watching, kind of not unlike what I said about the U.S., where we need to take some tough medicine and actually change some of our entitlement programs. The fact that in the periphery there doesn't seem to be a lot of will to do that is a real concern. However, we still think Europe, as I said, is kind of coming out of the trough, and in the aggregate, obviously fueled by Germany. That it's going to be okay, and that the worst things that we thought could have happened and that we worried so much about appears to be the will not to let those things happen, which of course is incredibly important for the euro.
Well, thank you very, very much. I don't see any more hands here, so it seems you've answered all the questions. And as always, important for a conference, the first keynote. And if this keynote and the Q&A has answered all the questions we have, and we'll continue that for the rest of the conference, it's going to be a great conference. Karen, thank you very, very much for being with us. Thank you. Thank you.